day, my fellow Americans and good people of the world. Today I'd like to address you in continuation about America's 250th birthday. I am exploring where we are right now in terms of our current government, the representatives in government, our current executive branch, and their lack of care, and all the ways that they're failing the American people. They're failing to do good for the people and right by the world. They're failing to do right by the people and good for the world as well. So what I am looking forward to is distinguishing how we can move forward from here, away from kind of how I see the political realm is trying to distinguish themselves as what they're going to be in the aftermath of Trump. And so you see people like Vice President J.D. Vance really trying to stand out on his own. He's going and he's doing fundraisers where billionaires are helping him fundraise millions of dollars. He's going on this book tour for this book that he wrote to help introduce everybody to his mindset, I guess. And he's, doing public engagements. He's trying to take the forefront of what's happening in Iran so he can use that as a step up for his distinguishment of how he's going to be different from Trump. But he's working really hard and almost desperately to try to win over the hearts of the MAGA people. And he's just not a trustworthy person. I don't think that he has really taken the time to understand the orientation and the alignment of his soul print alignment. I think that his motivations, things that motivate him, the things that inspire him, the things that get him going and that he focuses on are really very self-centered. He's very much a deviant. He's, a slick-talking person. He is kind of been adopted by Peter Thiel and raised to be his little minion that's gonna be in government to help to turn things in the way that Peter Thiel likes. And for all of the really interesting and incredible things that Peter Thiel has been able to accomplish in his life pursuits, I really think he has a very distorted outlook and worldview, and I don't think he's the type of person that should be making decisions on behalf of everybody collectively. He's tried really hard to try to make independent islands so that he can have them individually governed, and he wants to have a government where he can do whatever he wants, advance whatever type of technologies, and have no rules and regulations and bounds. And he found this a very hard and very expensive thing to do. It doesn't matter how much money you have, it's a really hard thing to do. And so instead he's been trying to take on and assimilate and kind of infiltrate governments of other countries to try to find the right place where he can cultivate the conditions by which he doesn't have to have regulations or rules. Who cares about human safety or life, who cares about the planet, whatever. And it's perfectly fine that he's creating a surveillance state. That's the person who's backing J.D. Vance. And so J.D. Vance, for whatever facade or mask that he likes to try to hide behind to make it seem like he's a decent person, really when you listen to the substance of what he's saying, the underpinning principles, you can tell that, really what he's about is not really conducive to a sense of, he cares about America and Americans. I think he cares about deviance, and he wants to make the right conditions for those types of people to prosper and thrive, because he's one of them. And I'm really disappointed in him, and I feel pity for him in the way that he goes after Pope Leo and the Vatican. He's supposed to be this converted Catholic, and I have nothing against religion. I think religion is one of the good things in our country. Has the potential to be bad, but everything has that potential. Depends on the attitude and direction of the heart of the person who's guiding it and living the embodiment of it. But for him to make it seem like he knows better than the church, he knows better than the Pope, a very learned man who has spent his time really cultivating a sense of like how do you become the living embodiment of the church, and to be that place of belonging for all these faith holders and believers, and help them orient to what is truth and reality, and a sense of like true communion with one another, and not having a, a grading system by which you love people, and so especially his attack on how Pope Leo is a lover of immigrants and really doesn't like to see how the world is treating the concept of immigration. JD Vance is a very hardliner when it comes to immigration. He may not say it outright, but he obviously is. He's very much aligned with the closed borders and pure blood, and our nation is about blood and kin, and we got to keep that sacred and all these things. And like how he's going after the Haitians, and how he's going after all of these people who he feels like he can attack, that is going to send a signal to all the racist people that he needs to have vote for him, that is going to get them giddy and happy and think like, oh, this is a guy who's going to create the conditions where it's okay for me to be racist. I just want to be able to go back to lynching, and he's very much creating the conditions by which that's okay. And so he has to, of course, nullify what the Pope is saying about immigration is about respecting all lives, respecting and valuing all lives. And so it's sad to me that this person claims to be a religious person, but somehow he knows better than those who have been practicing this religion by default for the entirety of their lives. I remember listening to a story about Pope Leo as he was growing up, him, embodying as a young child the sense of that he was, preaching to others, and already building that sense of community and leadership from a very young age. It's like he knew in his heart that that was his calling. And for somebody like JD, who's just coming into, he's still in his becoming process of, becoming a Catholic, and he already thinks that he knows best. And it's like, I think he needs to, really be silent for a while about that and really contemplate deeply what he's saying in regards to that, because he doesn't have room to speak in that regard against, a leader of a faith that he's trying to create conditions of doubt for faith believers by denying and rejecting the leaders of faith. He's creating a doubt in the minds of believers so that they don't listen to the voices of reason from their religious leaders, but instead listen to him and how he believes that, things should be interpreted with the skew of his ideals of religion. When he puts the veil of his religious belief over his beliefs of policy for immigration, you can see the continuum factor that goes through it is a sense that he does not value and respect all lives. And, the teaching of Christ that he's supposed to, be faithful to, says to love all people unconditionally. An unconditional, solicitous, loving regard for all people. And if there is one law in the universe, it is to love thy neighbor. I mean, everything sums up to that, otherwise known as the golden rule. I add into it the platinum rule. Golden rule, do unto others as you'd have do to them, they do to you. Love your neighbor as you love yourself, but also love your neighbor as they want to be loved. Treat others as they want to be treated. That's the platinum rule. And JD doesn't have a sense for that. I'm pretty sure that he has no notion of how to respect the different people that make up America And so what he will need to do if he was going to be a leader of it is to conform America to fit his ideal of what that should represent. And anybody who deviates from that will be punished, because punishment is their way of approaching these things. They don't know how to administer. They know how to overturn things, and they know how to punish things. They don't know how to discipline or to administer or to care. And, you know, there's very few other people that really like stick out in the GOP, other than some like highly controversial and very super racist people. The other troubling person, of course, is Marco Rubio, who wants so badly to go to war with Cuba that I don't think that anything else in the world would matter to him other than that while he was president. And I can understand the, I guess, motivations is almost the word, the sensibilities that he uses to justify that, his justifications for it. But at the same time, you know, it's failing to do good for people and right by the world by having your motives set on justifying violence against other people and other populations because you don't agree with their way of doing things. You know, it's much better to inspire and to support and to help develop and create mutual accords with one another's and shine a prime light example of a better way of being, a role model, than it is to try to go in and take something by force and force people. Like, you know, the problem with force is that it's a gun pointed to somebody's head, and you only have so many bullets, and then you run out. And then there becomes a point in time where you've killed off enough people that the rest of everybody behind them is so enraged by you using violence against these people that were their people that they then rise up in arms against you. And so you've created enemies that you never had before, simply because you chose to use the force that you had. True power is restraint of force. It's self-control, you know, and that has not been wielded. And Marco Rubio lacks the capacity to be honest with the American people. You know, everybody in the GOP really has taken that turn, unfortunately, as they have been, you know, assimilated into the magnification of, you know, the Republican Party. But Marco Rubio flat out lied to the American people and said that, oh, we went in and we attacked Iran because they were within days of having a nuclear weapon and we had to do this. And, you know, if we didn't go and do this, more people would have died and it would have been more of a disaster because Israel was going to go and bomb it anyway. So, you know, we had to make a move. And we all know that wasn't true, was it? These were like political talking points, and he had to speak because Trump isn't coherent enough to speak on anything of substance. And so he went out there and he faced the American people and he outright lied to us and intentionally deceived us, and then tried to justification the slaughtering of people, including the use of AI that led to the slaughtering of small children in a school in Iran. And there hasn't been any formal apologies for that. There hasn't been any attempts to reconcile that. That was the gun that they used and now created all of these enemies that we didn't have before. All of this amassed hatred, all of these points to which we have to now reconcile and seek forgiveness, and we weren't at that point before. We're way worse off than we were before. You know? I mean, it was already bad enough as it was. These, you know, fake negotiators went over and tried to negotiate only as a distraction from, you know, not letting the left hand know that the right hand was getting ready to blow up these people that they're sitting across the table from, and they had no intentions of negotiating with them, you know. And so you're creating these people to be even more hardline, pissed off, and not exactly happy about America. That's where we're at. That's where we're being led by current administration and the GOP that have no sensibilities of anything other than just always reverting to what Trump says, because he's the talking head and he's the one they pinnacled all the power into. And so now they just have to run with it. And there's no turning back. You already sold your soul, to bet on this horse, and you got to stick with it. And it's like, it's one thing if Trump was capable of change, a change of heart, change of mind, if he could be reached with reason, if somebody could come to him with logics and just be like, this really isn't the best thing. And it wasn't based off of somebody, with some sort of power over him telling him what to do, but rather him just, using his own sensibilities, his own philosophy to determine, like, this really is the best thing for all parties involved. This will build goodwill and better friendships. This really is based in the truth, and then just determining from there what's best to do. Like, that would be different if people defaulted to him in that regard. But he's erratic, and you can't anticipate what he's going to do next. And from one moment to the next, he's looking for the next thing that's going to get him in the papers and get him on the TV channels and get the news talking about him and everything else. And it's like chaos and mayhem and controversy. He's literally President Pandemonium. But you know why this is happening? Because we needed this test on us as American citizens to say, so because we are not doing a very good job of, picking better people to lead our country, that's why we have somebody in the office who's pushing back on all, our institutions and all our systems and all those integrities, and those things are starting to fall apart. Granted, those things had integrity before Trump started, like, removing pieces, like this was a game of Jenga, and it's like, if I move that piece, let's see if it falls over. Things had integrity before he starts, like, pulling things apart at the seams, and now things are, like, teetering, and some things are just completely falling apart. But this is a time for us to be able to evolve past this sensibility. It's a time to be able to, like, really listen to what the people that have captured the minds and hearts of the Americans, from the GOP, and, like, really what they're saying that is of interest to the voters that voted for them, and then listen to the people in the Democratic Party that were voting for them, and, like, really get to the substance of it. It's like, what are we all underneath it all trying to say what we want, given 250 years reflecting back on everything that's happened? Man, I would think by now we would be in a much better place. I would think by now, like, we would have accomplished a whole lot more, but we haven't gotten as far as we could have. And what's been hindering progress is a lot of this sense that, the government has become this tool to conduct evil in the world, rather than an instrument of righteousness that does good things. Does right by the people and good for the world, does good for the world and right by the people. And my sense of, where I would like us to be in the next 16 years, moving forward, it's a little bit of a different vision than what we have been led into. I want to take the best of what everybody has been saying that they want to push for, and find a way to do it in such a way that is not offensive and doesn't turn people against one another. My really, really, really big problem with the Democratic Socialists is, I get it, I understand, I value and respect your enthusiasm and your advancements and your protocols and your methods, your determination, your grassroots momentum. Like, all of this is great, especially because, it's about caring about something and trying for something that is not just about, small group of people benefiting and everybody else getting screwed. It's like, it's finally time to make the people who've been screwed this whole time finally be able to make it in the world. I get it, and I love it, and I respect it. However, I don't think that that is right for the national government. I don't think that we should have somebody that is adhering to democratic socialism as being president. And the reason why is because you are just embedding another faction that is a concentrated power that will never be able to bridge the gap with this other concentrated power that exists right now. You know, I want to render what Trump is doing and MAGA is doing, I'm going to render it obsolete. And not because I'm going to fight against that system. I'm going to build something that's better, that just makes that nullified, you know? That really just does not matter. None of that matters. Because all that matters is the attitude and direction of our heart moving forward in this new direction where we can all go together. You know? And democratic socialism is about fighting the oligarchy and damn them for hurting us and always disadvantaging us, and there's so much infectious rebellion, and they're directing it towards an attack on the other side. And our nation right now needs something that's going to help us come together in terms and conditions that we can all believe in and trust in together. You know, we need all hands on deck, and we need to have an executive that's going to be able to speak to all people authentically and generally enough where it's like, you know, get where you're coming from, man. Totally respect your vibe. I don't want to stand in your way of making progress, but how you do something really, really matters. And to me, I think that mutualism is the better approach, because it's something where what we're doing is for mutual benefits, mutual securities, mutual interests, mutual respects, mutual trust. Is understanding that, you know, what works for the democratic socialists in New York, and they're making things start to function there better, and man, they got a really good positive community vibe there, and it's inspiring so many people in the nation to like really come together in that way, coalition build towards like, yeah, let's give ourselves more power and build it together. That's great, man. That is not going to work everywhere. It just won't. Small town, rural farming communities are not going to get down with that business, you know? But they absolutely really need somebody to care about what they need, to empower them and uplift them, because they have been set at just a tremendous disadvantage. Economically, they are being brought under and led to ruin. You know, whether it's the tariffs or other policies, you know, just lack of care and consideration, like Trump making trade deals with other nations that are really like discounting American farmers, like they're struggling. You know, data centers are eating up all the water, and so farmers are having to fight against data centers. It's like, do we feed the machine or do we feed the people? You know, and then we have these farmers, generational farmers, that are losing their farms, they're losing their lives, they're losing their minds, they're losing their substance, they're losing everything. Their dignity, their pride, because there's nobody there that says, you know, I don't want to give you a hand up or a hand out or some impossible capitalistic chance at a big break. I want you to benefit from opportunity of a fair shake. America is bringing it on home, and we are strengthening the coherence of our nation. We are distinguishing ourselves as self-reliant and self-determined, and we are empowering ourselves so capable that we are so well cared for here in America. We are stewarding our welfaring for everybody in America, that we are able to extend that sense of welfare and stewardship to other countries too, without our disadvantage. Mutualism. So you're not going to get the same type of, you know, buy-in from people in rural farming communities as you're going to get from people in these really dense urban centers. Everybody needs to be able to cultivate their coalition building, their community building and development, and empower those systems. And we need to have a federal government that is really about recognizing the uniqueness of it all and understand, like, we have strengths and weaknesses in all these different areas. Let's play on them, you know? Let's make sure that, like, where there may be a shortfall here, like, other people can pick up the slack from this place, and in return you have something that you can give back to them that will help to bolster up their integrities, which helps to make them more able to be of service for your needs. And then it's this mutual respect, mutual aid, mutual care. And we need to have a presidency that's really about making it work for everybody, you know, in a way that isn't expecting somebody from a totally different walk of life to all of a sudden beat to the assertions of a new drum, you know, drop everything that they know to, like, do it and be this way. It's also to understand, man, times are changing and technological advancement is, you know, outpacing our laws, outpacing our way of life. So many people are getting left behind. So many people are being harmed by this technology. There's not enough, you know, boundaries to keep us all safe. And so we need to create the mechanism by which society and economy can, you know, work in a conciliatory way, concomitant conciliatory way with the advancement of technology in such a way where nobody's getting left behind or kept behind. And really turn our technology, turn our advancements and our developments into a proper intended use of advancing the welfare of all people. We want everybody to live the good life, and it's totally possible. You know, it's not like snap your fingers and it's done. There's work to be done. We have work to do. And we need to be able to have all hands on deck. But are we going to be able to accomplish that if we have a Democratic Party coming in where their whole focus is about punishing, you know, MAGA and Trump and all his cohort for all of the bad things they got away with while they were in office? You know, I think what's better is to, like, take that as the role model of what not to do. Bad humanity, deviance, shore up those weaknesses, create the laws that we need to prevent that thing from ever happening again, and then go through the work of, you know, discovering whether these people can, should, and where and how they can be held accountable. But hopefully in such a way where it'll help them to learn the lesson of discipline, to reorient back into alignment with, you know, the criterion standard of society. We all need to be in it under the same terms and conditions in terms of, like, you know, this is our purpose, this is the point, this is why we're here. And we can't deviate from that because it's not good. It's not conducive to our well-being. You know, and invite these people to come back in and to offer them forgiveness and extend to them the olive branch. Not to say that, you know, the bad things that they've done are not going to have consequences, but I think what is more detrimental to people like that who have deviated and who have caused us harm is for them to find that their way of life no longer is a channel by which they can operate by. We've nullified that. They no longer have that as a means for them to get along in society because we've diverged and we're going in a different direction. You're welcome to join us, but you have to leave, you know, your deviant selfishness behind because we're moving forward in mutualism. Give them a welcome opportunity of invite to join us. You know, and I don't see the Democratic Party doing that. I understand everybody's mad and they're pissed off and they want accountability and that it shouldn't be this way. I agree. So we make laws so transparent, so coherent, so clean, full of so much understanding of what our new tolerance bounds are. We ain't standing for that no more. You know what I'm saying? And for there to be teeth to our laws, actual enforcement that is default and not about whether somebody can be manipulated in their head or exploited or extorted or threatened into changing their mind and not upholding the laws it's supposed to be. Like, this is it's set. Once you have deviated, Corrective measurements are in place, and it's a system that goes and you can't stop it once it's started. So that gives you more than enough reason to start doing the right thing, right? And then from that point, once we've distinguished and delineated and defined, this is what America stands for. These are our integrities, and we are restoring ourselves to wholeness based on the delineation, the demarcation of those integrities. Then we turn to the people who have deviated from that. The reason why we had to create these laws is because somebody went out of bounds, We thought these were things that were just understood. Good humanity, we don't do that to each other. Oh, but you don't understand good humanity. You don't have the inherent self-control to not deviate in those ways. You're self-centered, and you're incapable of care and common humanity. Okay, I get it. Well, now there's a bound, and get in alignment with us. You know what I'm saying? And not in a sense of like, haha, in your face, we caught you. Not in the sense of like punitive punishment, but just like, thanks for showing us where we need to shore up our weaknesses and restore integrities. We're aligning that now. It's very transparent. And if you're deviating from that now, there's consequences. And if you want to integrate and belong here, man, you're going to have to get on board with our sense of this is our purpose, this is where we're going. You can either join us or go find somewhere else to be where you can get away with doing all these bad things because it's not going to fly here anymore, And at that point in time, it gives them a chance to change their mind, change their heart, join us. If they choose not to, that's their life choice, that's their way. But they no longer have legitimacies that they can build up these concentrations of power, money, and wealth and influence in American society anymore. Because we just don't stand. That's not our values, man. That's not what we're about here. That's not what we're going to stand for. If we're going to stand on business, it's going to be that those sorts of things just ain't. That is not the American way, And at that point in time, then look at people and say, we had traditions, we had rules, we had norms before. We had laws, and you infringed those, you broke those. In a time when there wasn't accountability, there, wasn't anybody like that we could turn to that could set things right. And now there's a responsible party, and we're going to call you out on those things. And the point is, again, not to be punitive, restorative, and to set the terms and conditions of disciplining ourselves back into alignment with mutual accords. Excuse me. And that's why I don't think that the Democratic Party is really going to succeed. And the MAGA Party is obviously not going to succeed because anything that they do is just going to be more of what they've already done, and it's really, really bad for lots and lots of people. Bad actors with nefarious intent doing bad things to good people, and there's a lot of human suffering, unnecessary human suffering happening because of it, and, it's bringing out the worst in everybody, and it's really hurts my heart every single day that I wake up and I see more effed up things that they've done to people. The government is supposed to do for you, good for you, and instead this government is doing bad stuff to you. And it hurts, it's painful, it's sad, it's depressing to be like, man, these are supposed to be people we trust in. This is stuff that's supposed to be like, there's good in the world and we're a part of it, Like, at least I know there's somewhere we can turn to when something goes wrong, and there's going to be somebody who's going to make it right. And our government's supposed to be that type of, institution, organization, administration, and it's just not. So, these people who we've misplaced trust in, they really ran with it in a negative direction, and they shouldn't be trusted any further. And so I think the best way moving forward is for us to just really show them all that we care. We care so much more about advancing a future where it really works for everybody Nobody's being disadvantaged. Nobody's getting kept behind or left behind. Everybody lives the good life. We're moving forward in mutual accords. We have a vision of what's to come, and we know, why we're here and how we can participate. We're building scaffolding for our lives to get us there. Like, that's what we should be about, and leave all the rest of this stuff behind, That way, in year 268, we can look back and we say, man, we've had 18 years of getting our act together. Look what we've done. We have come so far, so fast, and everybody's living the life and they're loving it. We still have differences and there's conflicts, but we have the appropriate resolutions for those conflicts. We see where we're going, and we're so focused on that looking back is not about, reminiscing that we wish, things could be the way that they were before, but rather looking back and saying, like, I'm really glad we had that experience. Next chapter. What's next? And look back on 250 and say, like, we weren't capable of like this massive whole national celebration at this time because, there really isn't any great common cause for us to wrap our hearts and minds around and be like, yes, America. We have the American flag, and that's an icon and a symbol, and yeah, we say the Pledge of Allegiance, and we can sing the national anthem. But what else do we got but each other? And there's no intent to move us all towards one another. I think that there is this concept that I believe in as I'm working on what I call the human element, and it's called degrees of separation. And it's just understanding that we don't all belong in close proximity with one another, but we all belong together. And there's somewhere in which, we can be a part of this great, beautiful mosaic of human experience and not step on each other's toes or to get in each other's way or impede one another's sensibilities of who we are as a person or our pursuit of happiness, or hinder or prohibit people from, taking on, these great strides of, personal development and trying to be in service to others and advance human civilization and society and all these things. Like, show up with your culture, identities, your roots and your culture, and share that, and share your traditions and your values and your culture and things like that. Like, we're not always going to be able to get wholly along. It's everybody has their place of belonging, and you just have to find the right orientation. It's kind of like, kind of like a puzzle where every piece fits, it belongs somewhere, but you have to just find the right orientation. And so in that sense of America's a place that's like big enough for everybody to belong, and we're diverse enough that everybody can find their place of belonging. And there's so much variation that, like, you don't have to be and do the same thing you've always been. You can change over time and embrace that, and it's a beautiful thing, And if you want to just live that same truth and constancy for the rest of your life, that's good too. I think everybody has a continuum of truth, like who they truly are inside, and that's their soul print values. And, let's create safe space for people to explore that, discover that about themselves. Let's make economy about liberation, because to me, that's what liberation means. Liberty means economy. And let's liberate ourselves to the point where we can take risks for higher things. We can spend time doing the development of ourselves and our humanity, our relationships with one another. Like, those are the sorts of things that no machine will ever be able to do for us, nor should we ever want it to. And so, we can embrace technology that helps to liberate us, and turn away from everything being about, like, constantly working all the time. We have to have fun, and we have to, explore, and we have to learn, and we have to engage in the way we go about doing that, the ontology, the way we live, Our life ways and our models for reality have to match up to this sense of, our purpose is so much more than what we do for a living. It's how we make a life, how we live each day, how we choose to show up, who we choose to, have part of our inner circle, who we spend time with and surround ourselves with, how we are of service to others, how patient we are, how kind we are, all the good virtues, really live them out loud. Like, these things are way more important than us, constantly worrying about working, and our capacity of society to organize and orient and implement and, structure and framework and systematically formalize and, engineer outcomes and technologically advance, like, all these things are ways for us to create liberation for everyone. And when we have a proper intended use of, like, we're trying to establish eudaimonia, be well, America works for everyone without the disadvantage of anyone, so nobody gets left behind or kept behind, everybody lives a good life. And we do that by welfaring stewardship, and that's the purpose, that's the point of the exercise, that's why we're here. Then we can focus on accomplishing that. And now that we have, a trajectory, something to work towards together, things start to fall into place, and we have to work. It's less hard work that we have to do. So we can take more time to do other things. And there's so much that we can automate about a system that we know where we're going, that we can just kind of like plan out the arrival of when then we do have to pay attention and start putting in the work. And then we can set the machine and it does its thing, and then we come back and do some more, and I think that once we have a proper intended use, we can work towards that, and it becomes less scary. Like, I know it's frightening to think that, our labor force and our workforce is going to change because of technology. Our economy is going to change, our value systems are going to change. But these can all be good things. Change isn't scary. The only thing scary about change is the fact it's like not sameness. It's like, what do I do now if it wasn't the thing that I learned how to do then? It's like you adopt new patterns for living, You change over time. Evolution is an important part of the human experience. All life evolves. And so if we take it as a process of progress, we're evolving, we're expanding, we're transforming, we are becoming our best version, we're in striving for that, we're on a continuum, we're doing it in a sense of trying to create that imperishable world peace, that thing that we can rest our heads on and be like, we're doing the good work, man, and this is for everyone, and then our differences, our conflicts of interest, our sense of this is the right way to do it, this is the right way to do it, can always have a point by which we can settle back down, come back to center and say, okay, let's hear out your plans, and really argue the finer points. And let's give ourselves a little slack to try to make progress in that way. But let's not put all our eggs in one basket. Let's not, bet the whole house. And without understanding, like, really, is it worth it? And I think that that's our job right now to do, to really reflect on what's worth it. If let's just say we all have to work together, you have no choice, we all have to work together, what do you want to work towards? What can you consent to? Say, I agree, and I'm in it. I am naturally compelled to involve myself with that. You think about, like, the Declaration of Independence, our founding of our nation. Not everybody wanted it. We had a whole Revolutionary War, fought out to say, like, oh yeah, you want to be independent? Like, how bad do you want it? And we fought to prove, oh yeah, we want it bad enough. And we made it through, and it was incredible, the sacrifices that people made, how much in their hearts they felt it was the right thing to do no matter the cost. They had duty, they had honor, they had sacrifice. They knew it was the right thing to do. In the right way, for the right reasons, they showed up and they did what they had to do to make it work. And we have carried that on generation after generation to make this work. Everybody has given something to the cause of advancing America to where we are now. And I just foresee we have so much farther to go. And the only way to get there is if we go together, but it has to be something that we all feel in our hearts is like we want to go there. I want to be a part of that process. You know, I don't belong in the world that MAGA's creating because it's so hate-filled. It's so hate-filled. It's getting a good laugh out of hurting people. It's making money off of hurting people, damaging things. Turning a profit off of human suffering is no way of life. That's not integrity bound. You know? Leaving whole swaths of people behind. Discounting, devaluing human life. Being racist and bigoted, misogynistic. Like, these are not virtues at all. I don't belong in that world because I belong somewhere where we all belong, you know? And as much as they're going to fight to keep that way of life because they have found value in legitimacy, you know, in distinguishment and profit and credibility and prestige out of it, their whole value systems are based off of it. I get that. I can respect that they have created value there that matters to them in ways that are important to them. I can respect that. Broadly, generally. But when the things that you value come at the direct cost of eradicating other people, what you're saying is that nothing else in the world matters except for your sensibilities. And that you're only willing to see the world in your way. And you refuse to see that there's blind spots to what you see. And instead of like taking the time to get to know other people so you can learn your blind spots by broadening your perspective and perceptions for getting to know somebody else that helps to broaden your worldview, and then be able to integrate and assimilate those things which actually are reasonable, you know, not shut off your mind in a bigoted way to say like, I reject you because you're black, or I reject you because you're white, or I reject you because you're rich, or I reject you because you're poor, or I reject you because you come from Mexico, or I reject you because, you know, you don't speak English. Like, these are all superficial ways of keeping categories. And yeah, you could draw a little line of distinction and say anything outside those realms I wholeheartedly reject. But man, what a limited world to experience. You're missing out on so much beautiful humanity. You're missing out on all the colors, all the flavors, all the sounds, all the variations, all the goodness, the kindness, the tenderness, the gentleness, the confusion, and, you know, the sensibilities, the philosophy. You're losing out on all of those things because, you know, you have conformed things into this very isolated world experience. And I can't live by that, you know? I'm a very expansive type of person. Like, I love to learn about different things and different people. I love to put myself in other people's shoes. Empathy is like a superpower, and I love to embrace it. And, you know, it takes a lot of time. This is why I can broadly and generally say I understand where you're coming from, people in MAGA, you know, but I can't, you know, I can't subscribe to your worldview, because in your worldview, all of these other people that I have grown lasting relationships with, bonded ties, deep sympathetic love, fond and endearing memories, a sense of like respect and appreciation and value, like all of these other people, your world rejects and won't allow in. They're not allowed to be in your world. And I refuse to let go of all of those people in order to belong in your tiny little ideal. that doesn't really have a lot of prospects for, good outcomes or good experiences. I can't live the good life in there. To me, it's not a good life if, you're mostly focused on hating other people and harming and getting a kick out of it. Those are the thrills that you seek. I can't be a part of that, man. But what I can do is respect that that's what you've accepted for yourself. That's what you've created, and that's what you determined. That's what you want. Okay. There has to be space for you to exist because there's something about what you learn and and you represent and you reflect the rest of us, and that you learn in your own terms and conditions, in your own, starting point in life experience, that is important for the rest of us to know exists. But that does not mean that you get to be mainstream and overtake everybody else and then everybody has to conform to your way. Because in my world, we all belong. In your world, I don't belong, and neither does anybody else that I'm taking along with me. So do you see, like, expansive, broad, welcoming for everybody, including you. Come along, come to the good side. We have cookies, Or to the dark side, where you will, in this perpetual cycle of conflict and hatred and harm, and those are always going to be the end results. The outcomes will always end in suffering and in pain and in isolation and humiliation and rejection and conflict and infighting and violence in every form and every fashion. That's what you get out of that. And all the goodness that you see in there, it's not because MAGA is good. It's because you, something within you, something than others that are a part of that community still has good within you. Everybody has inherent good within them. But who you surround yourself with brings out either the best in you or the worst in you. And there are so many beautiful, bright minds that I have loved, respected, and appreciated that I have seen be taken over to the dark side of MAGA, and all the goodness in them was overshadowed by all of the bad stuff that was brought out in them by just being involved in that world. So, come to the light. Come away from that sense of, like, depression and darkness and violence and terror and human conflict and confusion and betrayal and lies and deception, like all of these terrible things that should make you feel icky and gross and reject yourself because you're even there and a part of it, and find the core of goodness within your heart and say, I'm stepping away from that, and I'm going to move away from that, and I'm going to move closer and closer towards those things that resonate with the best parts of me. This is like the goodness that I feel that's not perverted goodness. It's not like, it makes me feel good to make somebody else hurt. Like, no, like the goodness of, like, when it's a reciprocal thing, it's like genuine agape love, and you feel that for another, and you feel that from another unconditionally, like, cultivate that. I want some more of that. Seek and find that. Follow your heart to where you find more of that and you embrace that. And that's where you build coalitions in terms of, a political philosophy that says, like, there really is a way that we all can work together, and all of our best ideas advance us and get us to a point where, the bickering and the infighting is just the interesting parts of being human. Like, it's fun to, have the competitiveness of, like, I can do it better, that's why sports are so profoundly important, because they bring out the competitive nature in us. It's the sense of, like, my team, it's factioning without the friction of conflict and violence. It's like competitive nature of my team, your team. It's just like which was so great. in the NBA Finals. You know, like my team is Golden State Warriors, but I was rooting because they weren't in the finals. I was definitely rooting to have New York win. You know, the Knicks worked so hard to get to where they were, you know, and the Spurs fought really hard too. They have some incredible players, like amazing talent. And the competitive nature between the two different teams, and you know, when the Knicks won, everybody was a Knicks fan, you know. Everybody just felt so excited about the underdog, and being there and celebrating with the team, celebrating with the town or the city, and celebrating with the state, and celebrating, you know, the entire arena of sports. And it was just such a profound way to be like, you know, at the end of the game, you know, the other team went to their competitor, their rivals, and embraced them. Good game, you know. And so it's okay to have the you know, your community and your cliques and your groups, and you know, you have your teams and have your coalitions that you're building, and you're empowering one another, and that's cool and it's good and it's fine as long as it's not harming, you know, hurting, degrading, or devaluing. It's like, let's keep this on the up and up. This, you know, good game, clean game, respect everybody. And we can have that type of environment because it will bring out the best in us, you know. And there's enough of the like people who don't like America externally. There's enough bad actors in nefarious intent that really want to see the downfall of America, that I don't think internally we should be doing their work for them, of factioning ourselves to create splits and rifts and fracture our society, disform our sensibilities of how we stay united as a people. Don't do the work for, you know, the external forces that have it out for our ruin by us choosing to infight with one another over petty bullshit. Excuse my language. We have enough troubles of our own that we have to work towards reconciling them, but at least do it on the terms and conditions of, you know, we all might have our different, you know, teams or whatever, but we're all American. You know, we are all of America, we the people. And that's enough for us to, you know, stay committed to working towards, you know, establishing our justice, ensuring our domestic tranquility, providing for our common defense, promoting our general welfare, and securing the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, you know, and work towards a common purpose together to achieve that preamble promise. And then empower ourselves so much that we can turn and face the world, and we will be anti-fragile, resilient, wholly together. So, you know, any outside forces can't come and bring us down. You know, and then we can stand up to the bullies and lift up the downtrodden in other parts of the world. Not because we're trying to make them be like us, but to empower them with the basic, you know, principles of life. Everybody needs food and water and shelter, and we can provide those basic structures of self-reliance for these people to empower themselves to stand up against their own oppressors, self-liberate. And they can do that with our support, our cooperative support of helping them to become welfaring stewards themselves. And that be our export, you know? That be America's exceptionalism. That be America's excellence. You know, our capacity not to like force other, you know, regime change and we're going to war on you. We're going to, no, man, we're just going to empower your people to become self-reliant so they can self-liberate, so they can self-determine. All we're recognizing is that everybody needs the baseline fundamental bare necessities of life. And we're developing the technological advancements, the systems for living, you know, lifestyle convenience products and services, and we're empowering people to help to translate that over for other people in other nations to embody as well. Because the ultimate purpose is welfaring stewardship. We have to steward our lives, our homes, our neighborhoods, our communities, our states, our regions, our nations, and the planet. Welfare and stewardship very much aligns with the United Nations 17 Sustainable Development Goals. 17 goals for sustainable development for the whole world in order to create a scenario universe in which, the world works for everyone without the disadvantage of anyone, so nobody gets left behind or kept behind. Everybody lives the good life. Globalistic eudaimonia. And it gets us in alignment with planetary boundaries, so we're living in the safe operating space, helping us to divest, defund, reimagine, rebuild our systems of, economy and resource and distribution and all of these things to, create a highly efficient system of, united, mutual accords with one another and build on that generationally. It's expanding on the sense of like the original spirit of intent of the United Nations, the original spirit of intent of NATO. Like the whole point was to create such a world paradigm where conflict, is just innovated out. Man, we've evolved out of that type of scenario. We're living on a continuum of an imperishable world peace, and we're living that together because we choose to, because it's what feels right, and to me and to you and to others, it makes you feel good, you feel empowered, and we're moving always away from that which is harmful. And we prepare ourselves with this, anti-fragile resilience, robust adaptability. We have to be adaptable, malleable, mobile, efficient, sufficient, sustainable, stable, consistent, steady, and on a continuum, in order to make sure that anything that are variables outside of our control in the scenario universe, we can be proactive, responsive to them as they come. So when we have natural disasters, everybody is locked in, engaged, and working as they need to, doing what they can, how they can, all the ways they can, to make sure that we can restore everything back to a sense of normalcy. It may not be completely brought back 100% to what it was before, but we can always improve and build back better, and we can always bring back robustness and find, weaknesses and shore them up and move forward in, destruction breeds creation, and a sense of there's always opportunity in every obstacle. We just have to turn it into an opportunity, and there is opportunity and there is challenge in crisis, but there's a way to turn that crisis into an opportunity for the might of great care. And so when natural disasters happen, we jump into action. We take care of business. And then we get ourselves back on trajectory to move on and move forward. Better now, having lived through that experience and found within ourselves everything necessary to come together in that moment to make things right. And that's very much where we're at right now. America's 250th birthday, right? We're in the middle of a crisis, and we have to come together in some sense of, okay, not exactly ideal in a lot of ways. For some people it might be great, but overall, things aren't as good as they can be and ought to be. I think that when we move towards eudaimonia, it's essentially seeking to establish this memorable, meaningful, actionable, intuitive and informative way of formalizing policy, and then establishing that as a framework. And then we find innovative approaches and ways to institutionalize and become responsive to, the needs of now, and make sure that our representational government really is reflecting the will of the people. So we use innovative methods to help create communication channels so that we're making sure we're translating, not just in a sense of communicating, this is what's wrong, this is what needs to be fixed, but also communicating through our processes the solution to the intractability of that problem, and then also communicating the outcome that we engineered and saying like, okay, that turned out exactly as we had thought, or it's a little bit off, but it's close enough to the outline that we drew for ourselves. Like, what did we miss along the way? Can we improve moving forward? Iterate, best practices, sort of thing. And then really explore the comfortable, conservative, progressive methods that help us to mechanize the functionality of our democracy. We need to find a way to create a more direct democracy. I believe the best way to do this is to create a fourth branch of government called civics, where all people, all hands on deck on the ship, actually have a legitimate branch of government that we operate from. All citizens operate in the civics branch. We solve for intractability of problems. We initiate corrective mechanisms, anti-corruption methods, and we translate what we want, in terms of outcomes of where our nation's going. And then create another ancillary layer of governance that establishes self-governance as a legitimate basis of self-determined self-governance that first and foremost makes the decisions about your own personal life, your own personal dominion is established. And then from there, only do other levels of government at the local level, the state level, and the federal level intercede on your behalf if it is something where they have to, conflict resolution or solve for the intractability of a problem you can't do yourself, or, intervene or intercede on your behalf, because it is something that is in your best interest and the best interest of others. But first and foremost, you have the ultimate say-so. The individual lowest concentration of power is established in the personal dominion of every person. And creating a constitutional amendment to allow that to happen, I think that gives everybody a basis by which we can determine, our laws now have to be oriented towards respecting the personhood of every person. The personal dominion, I get to have ultimate say in my life. And only if you have a legitimate, claim that this is something that we should be hashing out together in a higher level of conflict resolution, do we take it up to the next level of problem solving and governance, and then from there we work together to work out our differences and solve for the intractability of problems. But first and foremost, I get to self-determine, and you have to first and foremost prove that you have jurisdiction over, determining some aspect of my own personal choice to intervene or intercede or something to the effect. It gives us a legitimacy by which to argue, things like the right for a woman to choose what happens to her own body, these sorts of things. Those are very personal decisions, and that's a personal dominion jurisdiction. And you have to prove some sort of weight of legitimacy outside of that before you can even justify creating a law by which it conforms everybody in general. Like, you have to have a legitimate justification to intervene or impose or infringe upon my personal dominion, this sort of thing. And I think that that's important because that helps us to establish a more direct democracy. We also need to have innovation that helps us to communicate, technologically advanced communication between the individual people in the civics branch with the individual person in the executive branch, and the individual representatives that represent whole regions and populations of people, and to those who are in our jurisdictions of the justice system, to make sure that we are all always on the same page. We all understand the point of the exercise, the purpose, and where we're going, and have that communication channels that are always open so that we can stay on the same page. We can stay consistent. Everybody knows their job and what they're supposed to do and what's expected of them. Your duties, your rights, your obligations, your responsibilities, these sorts of things. And creating that sense that gives us a more direct democracy. So we have to worry less about, electing people into a representative position, because if they're not actually representing the people, there is a means by the civic branch, the people themselves, to oust the people who aren't actually representing them. These sorts of things. And or to, raise the flag and say, this isn't working for me in these ways. How do we solve for the intractability of this problem? And then a lot of what we have to focus on is the exploration and the discovery of our best practices. A direct democratic movement to accomplish the proper ends of eudaimonia, or welfaring stewardship. And again, being able to keep up the constant conversation with one another as to how we're accomplishing this. How are we doing? Vibe checks, so to speak, with what's happening, and give us the communication necessary to implement and establish our methods of stewardship. And that way we know when we're achieving eudaimonia and when we're falling short. And that's how we know we are the living answer to the question, does America work for everyone without the disadvantage of anyone, so nobody gets left behind or kept behind and everybody lives a good life? No? Oh, okay. Well, then how are we falling short, and where, and what can be done about it? Who can be empowered to do this, or who do we have to take some power away from because they're doing something that's harmful to others? These sorts of things. And then we determine those things together in a very open and transparent and very public platform of discourse, and do so in such a way that we activate one another, and we are able to, through our independence, establish that interdependence. Like, we're all in this together. I need you at your best, you need me at my best, so we need to make sure we're all empowered to be our best and do our best so that we can bring about the best outcomes that help us to live out in perpetuity this great experience of what it means to be American, And I think that eudaimonia is mostly about actualization of this self-reliance and self-determination in the process of conducting ourselves with mutualisms and living up to the preamble promise. When I think of what's happening with the celebrations of 4th of July, it's kind of... I feel sad that so much money was put into creating this, concentrated experience in the nation's capital, and not a lot of people feel welcome there, and they don't feel like that is a place that they can belong. They don't think it's a experience that they want to be a part of, and that makes me sad. Mostly because, this was a time for us to all be united to a common cause of, man, we did it. We got 250 years. Let's go for 250 more. Where are we going from here? It should have been a World's Fair kind of thing where, America's best of everything American was shined in this experience of knowing what we're about, and for every expression of who we are should have been this welcoming invite to come learn more, and instead it became this really weird, overpriced, commercialized wannabe MAGA rally, and it was dull, And if we didn't spend so much time fighting how much many of us dislike our current president and his administration, we could have spent more time of giving us a really big present, a really big gift that we could have unwrapped and unveiled at our 250-year mark. That on this birthday we could have opened it and it would have been a gift to each and every one of us. And it would have been this present of presence we're all here, man. In this time in history, it's a pinnacle point that people in future generations are going to look back and reflect on. And we could have shined a light so bright to say, America. You know? Where people could have like felt it in their hearts, like, man, imagine what it was like to be alive at that time. It reminds me of one of my most precious possessions is an old newspaper from the Mercury News from the bicentennial. 1976, a newspaper where it had a bunch of different articles. One of them was from Sam Levinson. Basically just wrote a letter to America saying, you know, things even then weren't so great, but man, we have so much potential and hope, and I have hope for us to be better and do better, and imagines us as, you know, baking a cake. That's what America is this great cake that we're baking together. And we need to add all of these ingredients because that's what makes the cake. That's what makes America America. And then we have to leave that recipe for future generations. So it's important for us to, you know, keep passing it along, passing this wisdom on generationally. You know, we are the ancestors, you know? Take that as a responsibility. You know, and when I look back to the mentality, the personality, the events of the time, you know, the historical context, their historical context back to, you know, on America's 200th birthday, their situational context, their find context, where they found themselves in the situation they were, you know, living in, the atmosphere, and how that informed what they were doing and how they were going about stuff, and how that really set the tone for, you know, so much evolution that came from that. These were the early years of some of the breakthrough technologies that really defined who we are today. And we are in the living, you know, embodiment of the outcome consequences of those decisions that those people made. And this is where we are. Man, I don't think that they would have thought this is where we were going to be. Think of the historical context of the Founding Fathers and their situational context and their fine context where they found themselves at that time, to the point where they felt so compelled. The only option we have, guys, the only option we have is to dissolution from our old government and to start new, do it on our own. And, you know, like, imagine what it was like, what must have been going through their heads and their hearts, and how difficult of an experience that was. Imagine what it took for them to compel everybody to get on board. Convince these people to go fight in a war to say, no, we are free and independent people. Imagine what it took. And I also think of the time was very different in terms of what people valued. You know, a man understood his duty and his obligation to his family and to his country to go fight for what is right, to make sure that we're free. You know, like, understand what must have been going through the head and the heart of the women who were birthing the next generation at that time period. Not knowing whether or not this was going to be any sort of success. Imagine having to birth a generation into such uncertainty. These were incredibly brave and very, like, ambitious and amazing people. We come from such heroes, you know? And it's amazing to me to see all that we have become as a consequence of their decision making. And then I looked at future generations and I'm like, I'm so sorry. But we have yet to get our act together to give you better outcomes, better situational context, better historical context to reference, better, find context where you're going to find yourself in your scenario universe. We're not doing a whole lot of intentional work like our founding fathers did and all the people that made it possible, because it wasn't just a few guys sitting in a room writing on a piece of paper saying this is the way it's going to be. It was everybody else that implemented it and brought it forth and secured it and fought for it and died for it, and built up on the integrities of it and led it through on perpetual development and momentum, and to pass it on to their children, the values of this matters, and now we're looking at future generations, and what are we telling them? Our president right now is telling us it doesn't matter that you're suffering to the point where progress is leaving you behind. You can't afford to live. You can't afford to get married, to have a house, to have children. But you are expected to work every single day, fingers to the bone, overtime hours if necessary, for meager pay that's not enough to even afford to pay for any of the cost of living. And I'm so busy investing on vanity projects that I can't pay attention to ways to make your cost of living just a little bit ease your burden, reduce your suffering, even care enough to hear how you faring. Are you doing okay? Our president is not instilling a lot of confidence or hope. What now? When you look at everything that's happening, what now is enduring and everlasting? What about America is eternal? Yes, our founding documents, absolutely. Our word is our bond. But what about the American experience can we say has that everlasting quality? That it can be an enduring legacy, that it's going to be a part of that continuum. It's the continuum factor. What is that for America? I always thought it was our immigration, because we're just this big, open, golden door of opportunity, and we are a welcoming invite to a situation that you can thrive on. Man, all you gotta do is just come and do your best and be your best, give your talents and service to others for fair compensation, work hard and strive and become your best and encourage others and grow your family and support your neighbors and grow community and build it up. And our immigration was our sense of we will never close our doors to the opportunity to become so much more than what we are. We will never shut ourselves out from the rest of the world. We will never forget where we came from. Everybody in America, everybody is connected to immigration. Even the natives of the land, the indigenous population, have intermingled with society and in populations, and we're all just this big, beautiful blend of what happens when people come from elsewhere to come and be a part of this shared and common experience. This sense that togetherness in a way that is beautiful and holistic and intentional. And it's making a way or finding a way or building the way, being the way, walking the way, living it out in your experience. And immigration has touched every part of our lives. And there's so much about our industries, our innovations, our educations, our way of being, the things that we own as possession, all of these things, we have an immigrant to thank for it. Everyone has come from somewhere else to be here. and be a part of this experience together. And I just want for the American experience to be a good one. I want the American situation to be a thriving one. And I want this to be a welcoming for everyone. And I think that should be our pride and prestige of our nation again. It should be the thing that we hold up our heads high and say, we are a nation of immigrants. You know? And that doesn't mean, like, invite all the people in and, like, we'll just make enough room. And it reminds me of, excuse the metaphor because it's kind of weird and it's very pop culture, limited reference, not everybody's going to get it, but this is where my mind went. There's an episode of The Simpsons where it's very hot summer, and they bring this portable pool in, and all the kids swim in this portable pool, and they go to leave for the day. All the kids had a great time swimming in the pool because it was a way to cool off, and they're like, how, when are you going to come back? Oh, I'm not coming back. So one of the neighborhood kids got a pool, and then he became the most popular person because everybody wanted to be in the pool, and the pool overstuffed itself to the point where the pool exploded, and then nobody had the pool. So long, explanation for a short sum up of, we have to make sure there's enough room for everybody who's here so that we don't overburden, the great thing that this is, that America is. And we need to make sure that those who are here are a part of enhancing the American experience and improving the, American and human situation, and to live in accord with one another and these sorts of things. We have to live in that mutual accord. And so immigration, in order for it to be the pride and prestige of our nation, really has to be something that we do intentionally and not punitively, not in a racist and bigoted, hate-filled, violent way, but embracing a really cohesive, intentional method of welcoming people here with invite, allowing them to integrate, and accept not everybody's going to fit in and belong. But those who do and who strive for it, you're a part of this process, and you're a part of this togetherness just as much as everybody else, and you do belong. And for those that, may not be able to integrate with us, that there's something about their sensibilities that just makes it impossible for them to live in mutual accord with us, those are the type of people that we can't allow here. If you're coming to do harm to us or to this experience, or to degrade it or to diminish, this beautifulness that we're creating together, you're not welcome here. And a lot of the process also needs to be like, while you may not belong here, that doesn't mean that you don't deserve to live a good life too. And that's part of the America exporting welfaring stewardship. Because there's so many people that come here that don't come here because they want to be here. They just want a better life. They want opportunity. They want peace. They want freedom from violence and freedom from oppression. And they want opportunity and advantage. And they want their children to breathe the free air, and everybody should want that for themselves and others. So there's a whole swath of these prospects, immigrants, that could come here and just learn our ways and be empowered to go back home and empower the people there and build up restoration of integrities there, so more people can stay home, where many of them would choose to be and stay and belong if only they could. And our immigration process, when it becomes welcoming and becomes loving and respecting and valuing all life, it becomes a part of our process of being able to live eudaimonia and to extend that to others. We become a nation of welfaring stewards, and we help others to become a part of that too, so we can create a global movement of welfaring stewardship. Imagine America 250 years from now, after we choose for ourselves now, we're going to become welfaring stewards, man. Eudaimonia is the way. And we're going to start living that out in the embodiment of that. Imagine 250 years from now, the historical context will have created for that generation. Mind-blowing potential, good outcomes, positive experiences, so much hope, so much opportunity, so much goodness, so much freedom, so much liberation, a reduction of violence, an end to wars and poverty, subduing human suffering, and the empowerment of the human spirit, and really a fair chance for us to cohesively accept that we're all a part of the same one human family. We are one people with a shared destiny. We will have set them up for that advantage. Imagine where we would be if we felt that that's what our founding fathers did for us 250 years ago. Imagine how we would feel today if we were that grateful for everything they did for us. Thank God for what they did, because otherwise we never would have been where we are right now. And, I think looking at it in that sense, we can be upset for a lot of reasons why things didn't pan out. We can be upset at ourselves for not living out our best version. We can be mad at, many of the people who led us astray and did, bad things. We're living in the negative outcome consequences of. But it's a moment of reflection to say, that's how it was. That's why things are as they are. This is, the choices that we've made. This is what it is as a consequence. But it's not what it has to continue to be. And that's what I hope that we take our 250th as what next needs to be done, I've been spending this time reading books, reflecting on our history. I've been also watching some documentaries that have recently come out. I've been listening to the news, and I have been listening to commentary, just conversations of people. I've been sharing in conversations. I've just been observing life. I've gone out into, society in the city, and I've just taken in how people are just living their day-to-day lives. And I just see vast potential everywhere. I see bad things happen. I do, and it frustrates me. Righteous anger gets boiled up every single day because it's humans have the potential for so much good, and they fail in a lot of different ways. I do too. I'm only human. But I recognize when we help one another, and we, give patience and just a little bit of space, and we extend kindness and empathy and compassion and understanding, a lot better things end up outcoming. And from where I see it, we are full of so much potential, and there's so much room to go forward. I really want to advance this ideal version of what is to come for America, because I do think it's the way to reconcile all of our differences into a mutual accord that has the lasting power and enduring eternal promise to uphold our nation and to let it become ever better version of itself, a more perfect union. And I don't want to infight against, the political left and the political right. I don't want to fight against the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. I want to be the responsible party. And I think the responsible party says it's okay that we have these differences. What's not okay is that we refuse to come together and to settle those differences into a mutual accord. It's not okay that we refuse to solve for the intractability of our problems. It's not okay that we ignore the tragedy that humanity is facing. It is not okay that we allow a small subset of the population to take us all in a direction that is causing tremendous harm to everybody else and to the planet. It's not okay that we have a president who was a liar, a cheater, an abuser, a grifter who has made $2 billion, right, in the first year of him being in office. And instead of, pledging that money to shore up the back end of all the disturbances that he's caused since being president, to help to advance forward those things that actually follow through on his campaign promises of helping to improve affordability in America. That's what I think that he should be doing. But he's not a logical person, and he doesn't listen to reason, and he's not surrounded by good people who are leading him in the right direction. And I think the attitude and direction of his heart is very self-centered. He is the embodiment of deviance. And I want to show the beautiful and best answer to the aftermath of Trump's presidency is to have a president who is all about establishing a criterion echelon of society. Policy frameworks, our tax code system, working directly with Congress in collaboration to establish the best practices for us to work out solutions to make things better. If I had $2 billion I would invest it in America's future. I would invest it in establishing and building out all the innovations that I have been blueprinting and designing and working in my mind's laboratory for all of these years of if we just built this and we installed that there and we put this here at this time, it would help to advance this in this way, which would lessen the burden here that allows us to take risk for higher things over here. And man, I would just orchestrate this huge, massive up-leveling of society to establish a criterion echelon of the good life for all people. And probably one of the most disappointing things about what the Supreme Court has recently decided was it's okay for, these super PACs to amass a bunch of money and collaborate with politicians and candidates to direct where that money is going to be able to be spent. So effectively just making these vast coffers of money that candidates can use to direct towards, competing for, a competitive, in striving for achieving the vote of people. And how can regular everyday Americans who have already been depleted of their, wealth and their capacity to have disposable income, they can barely make ends meet to pay their cost of living. Many people are sacrificing and going without bare necessities just to be able to afford the one thing they have found is most important. I need my medication, I can't live without that. I need my rent, I can't live without that. Whatever it is, and they sacrifice on food or they sacrifice on fuel or whatever else. How are those people expected to accumulate their money to give to a campaign that is supposed to compete with the people who are millionaires and billionaires and trillionaires, who put all their money into these super PACs that then combine with, an individual campaign to pay for all of these methods of convincing people you should be voting for this person, when these ads aren't showing you. It's showing you what they value is the capacity to, propagandize, do acts of propagandizing, convince you of something. And these millionaires and these billionaires and these trillionaires, instead of spending their millions and billions of dollars that they invest in improving the human situation that would make everybody be like, you know what, you're right, you do know where we're going and you're taking us somewhere where I want to go. I do want the type of people that you believe in that are all about helping you to advance the future that you want. I'm all in with that because it's good for me too. Instead of investing in building out a future that is a welcoming situation for everyone to thrive on, instead of investing that money in the improvement of the American situation, they are paying media advertisers to tell you what to do, what to think, and what to feel, to convince you to reject your reality, to, fall in line with what they say, and then to disenfranchise whole populations of people who would vote against what they want, because they need their politicians to be in there, because those are the people that are going to make decisions on their behalf, to make things work on their behalf. So the state becomes governed by proxy by these people who have vast swaths of wealth. And think of the attitude and direction of the heart of those people, that they think the best course for this nation is for them to invest in puppets that they can control in government than it is for them to invest that money into a situation where everybody would be like, yeah, you know what, where you're going, I want to come too. Your fantastic future sounds like a good time to me. I'm all in for helping to make that happen. Why? Because I'm going to benefit from it too. And so the people who have all this money, and a significant amount of it has been gotten from ill-begotten means. They have hurt somebody, harmed something, damaged something valuable and precious to the rest of us in their process of attaining that wealth. They have lied, they have cheated, they have deceived, they have hurt, they have harmed, they have stolen. That's how they've gotten this massive money, And everybody who's profiting off of that is all in on it. They don't care. They don't look at the consequences, the struggle or the pain and suffering humanity's facing because of their, the outcome consequences of their decisions. Instead of facing the consequences, and setting things right, they want to invest in setting the rules always in their favor, rigging the systems always in their favor, putting a disadvantage, preventing anybody from dissenting or rising up against them to make things different. And so the more and more that they get concentrated power, which they're being supported in concentrating that power, they're also being supported in everybody else being depleted of their wealth and their capacity to dissent and their empower. They're using this for nefarious reasons. They're bad actors because they don't want what's best for you. They don't care about you. They look at you as a problem that they need to throw money at to fix. And now the Supreme Court helps them in their endeavor to make money be the ultimate arbiter of the future. That's what's going to determine outcomes. It's not who's right or what's in the best interest of everybody. It's who has the most money, and that they're going to direct it in ways that's going to help to create more of an insulated pocket of thriving for themselves. And everybody else, well, we are what they extract from. And there's going to be a lot of them that are going to realize, well, there's nobody to, the whole AI bubble. Where's your customer base? You have no customers if nobody has the economy that's necessary to give you the money, It's all pooled to you. There's nothing to transact with anybody else anymore, And then it comes into a sense of really damaging humans, because once you've accumulated all the money, but you're still unsatisfied because you will never be able to curb your satiate your hunger for more. You'll never be satisfied. They're going to start turning into other ways. And you already see them doing that in a sense of, it doesn't matter how much money you have the equivalent of fuck you money, and you can get away with anything, and you derive sick, twisted pleasure from harming people. And it's the whole gladiator thing of I can watch these people that I'm forced to fight with one another in order to survive, and I find that entertaining, because what else is going to entertain somebody who has everything? So, I think we have a really big service that we have to do to those people to redeem the time for them and help them to save their souls, because everything that they're doing, yes, it's going to be bad as a consequence for the rest of us, but imagine the desperation of their souls being lost, sold for money and pieces of silver. And the deeply corrupt Supreme Court that is very much involved with, money is what is their incentive. That's the thing that matters to them. Have helped them to do this, and now the situation of like, how can we ever have fair and free and fair elections? Somebody that's like me who has this, being someone that has this passion to want to become president of the United States, but I don't have money. I don't have power. I don't have influence. I have a grand strategy. I have, value systems. I have intents. I have purposes. I have, good reasons. I have moral legitimacies. I have a want to give service. I don't want to work for a paycheck. I want to work for the people in advancing this potential for everybody to thrive in. That's what matters to me. So I don't have the motivation to go out and ask a bunch of people to give me money so that I can, plaster my face and my message, in enough places that people might take notice. And I'm working against a bunch of algorithms that are geared by the very, very rich and powerful people that don't want my type of message to resonate with people, so they're not going to help it extend anywhere. And I can stand with my little clipboard of signing people up for, I want to be a part of your future, and stand with the bullhorn on a pedestal out in the middle of a field somewhere, but how many people am I really going to reach from there? So it's understanding it's going to take the capacity to mobilize people in order to become president, but wanting to do it off of my own sense of values and legitimacies. I would love to be able to be so compelling to these very rich people. They're like, I will absolutely invest in what you're doing, because to me, I see your capacity for leading us in a direction that makes me no longer the villain or the bad guy. You help me to redeem the time and to save my soul. and you help to get everybody on board in a way that I would never be able to, because I can't connect with people like you do, because I don't care like you do. But because you care, I want to help to empower your capacity to reach more people so they can hear your message and it can resonate with them too. I want them to care about what you care about because I care what you care about. I wish that we could get money out of politics altogether. I remember there was a ruling from the Supreme Court where Clarence Thomas put in his words of essentially saying that money is like the voice of the people and it's like a vote, and diminishing that is like suppressing somebody's vote. Is in essence, this is doggerel sum up, but it stuck with me in terms of like his value system, and then learning how he has been so deeply corrupted over time when he wasn't this bad before, but somehow the money got to him and it perverted him and distorted who he is as a person and how he makes decisions and chooses to show up in the world. Power has the power to corrupt people, and that's why I've worked exceptionally hard of trying to test the limits of my soul print, to really confirm it, really understand, like where I can stand on business, what matters to me, so that when I am in a position with this extreme amount of power as president, that I'm going to be coming from a place of authenticity and commitment to something so much bigger than me alone. And that what I present as my campaign is my contract with the American people. Like, this is something that we're doing together, and that I am fully and wholly committed to doing, and finding a way to make it work together. And that it doesn't matter how much money or, all these people with power and influence, try to come and persuade or impress or to bully or intimidate and make things their way. I'm willing to become empathetic to understand where they're coming from so I can find that common through line within them. But I'm not going to allow them to determine the fate of the future, because I know that they don't care about you. But I do. But I also care about them. And so I'm the right type of mediator. I'm the right type of moderating influence. I know how to keep a home, and I think of everyone and everything, And everything to me is this inefficient system that needs to be engineered to find best practices, to work out and solve for the intractability of problems. I very much have an engineer's mind. And I think that's compelling to a lot of these, technocrats who have made their money through technology. Like, I can understand how that works. But I also see the humanities, and I see the culture and the roots, and I see, the human experience as being more important than, our capacity to make these external things. I think technology has to have the ultimate, proper intended use of creating a suprahuman capabilities, bring out the best in us. Not lose sight or to devalue or to erase or to replace humans, but to enhance us, help us to become suprahuman, creating this cyber symbiotic relationship for humans to become, an evolutionary development of so much more than what we ever could have been before, and for that to be a good version, our best version. But I think I can be compelling in ways for them to be willing to let go of some of that power and to pass on their capacity to make things happen, because they have accumulated capital, agency, and resource to help make things transact. And then my care to concern myself with how to best make sure that that's going to be invested in the ways that is going to achieve a criterion standard to elevate everybody up, and then get everybody on board to work towards that. Instead of everybody running on the, little hamster wheel of getting nowhere, but, still having to work so hard. Instead, working towards achieving something together, up-level their lives. I think this solves for, where people think that there's like lazy people in the world that don't do enough work and they just want hand-ups or handouts. And, that's what they think socialism is about. And they just want more people to work. And my thing is, like, people would work if there was work. And, society isn't designed about making work. Economy is about making money, But with the proper intended use, we have something we're working towards together, welfare and stewardship. We're creating that criterion standard of the good life for everybody. And we're all doing our part to contribute to that. And I think that's something that can be compelling for everyone, because it gets to the point where instead of throwing money at problems that never solve the root causes of it, we still have the same problems. We still have this impossible scenario of how we're going to deal with Social Security not being solvent, and having all of these issues of, poverty and human suffering and crime and all this other stuff. Like, if we invest the right way and we get everybody on board with an American identity and a purpose, a cause for our reasons for being, it would be enough that we can bridge the gap between the haves and the have-nots, and then everybody has the same shared value system at that baseline fundamental. At least we all know that we're working on this together. I also feel like there's a lot of people in the Democratic Party and the left side of the political spectrum that I just can't relate to, because they're so angry and disappointed and frustrated, and they just want to affect change. And I just think in a lot of ways they're going about it wrong. They're going about it in such a way, I can't belong in your world. You know, it feels like, was it one of my favorite podcasters, Adam Mockler, was talking about the waggy finger. You know, the Democratic Party's always wagging their finger at everybody. You're not doing it right. And it does. It feels like, you know, you're never going to be good enough. There's always going to be something that they're going to nitpick about, you know, and they have like this inferiority complex or something. And like, so they have to like bulk themselves up to make it seem like they're more important than they really are. And in a lot of ways, they're letting down the American people because, you know, they're creating this whole scenario where whole swaths of people can't belong because they're not willing to be, you know, like as easily offended as many of the people in the far left are, about everything. It's like, but at the same time, it's like there's nothing that they hold on to where they can like truly stand on business. You know, they say they want all of these things to work for everybody, but you know, they themselves are casting out whole populations of society. They're not willing to work out, you know, in this sense of how can we all come together? How do we, you know, what unites us? What brings us together? That's like kind of in consideration of the Supreme Court's decision about transgenders in sports. Um, the idea that my personal belief about it is that I think the most appropriate solution to transgender in sports is to have a tri-tiery sport system. Have a male gender and a female gender, and then a non-gendered sports. So boys sports, girls sports, and for everybody. And the reason why I think that's important is because it distinguishes the opportunity for the boys to compete with the boys, the girls to compete with the girls, and then everybody just to show up as you are and compete together and under the same understanding of, you know, there isn't a distinguishment between boys and girls in this. And then that makes it so that it doesn't force anybody to have to accept you as you are. If you are conforming in a way that is different than how they perceive you. So allowing transgender people to participate in girls' sports, now you're making this girl have to accept you, even though in their head and their heart that doesn't make sense to them. And while I do think we should all just accept everybody as we are, you're putting them in competition with one another in that terms. You know, and I spoke with this MAGA mother one time. She was at a city council meeting and she spoke out against the senator that was there and was just like, what are you doing about transgender in sports? And he ignored the conversation, but I went to her after the meeting and I was just like, you know, I was interested in what else you had to say. And she just essentially put it like, I don't think it's fair that in high school my daughter is competing in this sport, and there's a very limited slot of sponsorships and scholarships, and my daughter is now having to compete with somebody that had a better chance competing in the female sports and excelling than they would in the boys sports, and so they're more likely to get the sponsorship or the scholarship, and that disadvantages my daughter, and I'm not okay with that. I respected that and I understood where she was coming from with that. I'm like, well, to me it just seems like if we had a tri-tiery sports, then it would be all inclusive. Everybody would have a space of belonging to participate and, you know, and compete, and then it would be based off of everybody has a place where they can compete based off of nobody is questioning, you know, whether or not you belong or not. It's literally just about your competitiveness, you know, in the sport, the bare essence of the sport. And she said, thought about it for a minute, she would be perfectly okay with that. And all of the hatred that she had and all the anger about boys and girls sports, like, gone instantly. And she was like, yeah, I'd be okay with that. all of the angst and anger was gone, and she was instantly, I'm totally chill, I'm totally cool with that. And so to me, it was like, that seems like a more conducive to the well-being of in the best interest of everybody, and builds goodwill and better friendships if we just created that requirement in school. I played football in school, okay? I was a girl on the boys team. And when I went to play games, I had to go into the locker room by myself as a girl. In away games, it was extremely difficult for me to, because they didn't always have the girls' bathroom unlocked for me to go and change into my gear. And it was a difficult challenge for me, but I wanted to play football. I loved sports and I wanted to be a part. I was an outside linebacker, man. I loved it. But there was this disadvantage for me being a girl trying to play in a boys' sport because the accommodation wasn't there for me. They didn't expect that there was going to be a girl on this team, and it did make the boys uncomfortable because once they usually didn't learn to the end of the game, because I understood, that they would get uncomfortable, that now they knew that they were playing against a girl. And then the whole maybe masculinity issues come into question, but also like, oh, I just hit a girl and maybe I'm not okay with that. There's this whole moral dilemma that was created that just like didn't need to be there. But I really wanted to play the sport. And if the sport was designed to just accept everybody in it, regardless of gender, then it wouldn't be a question of whether I'm a girl or not. They just know I'm an athlete and I'm there competing, and I'm playing to the best of my talents and abilities, and you do the same, and may the winner prevail. But because that conversation wasn't had, because that anticipation and expectation wasn't there, it made it a much more difficult situation. And because we're still in the process of having the open public conversation about integration of transgenders in our society, because it hasn't been very long since the LGBTQ community even felt like they didn't have to be invisible anymore or hide themselves. We're just now getting to the point where we're integrating into society. So let's not just like jump full into it and then just make everybody adjust to it and expect everything to be fine and there not to be conflict, or come into it within the intention of integrating and to make this a welcoming process for all people. Like, I can't imagine what these transgender people are going through in terms of like competing and then having their awards taken away from them, or being rejected by other people because some people don't want them on the team or whatever. And not in a sense of like just being a racist, bigoted type of person, but in the sense of like, only girls belong and you're not a girl and I don't consider you a girl, and so I will never accept you. Like, there's no opportunity to break past that barrier and become accepting of that person, how they choose to show up with their personal personhood and their personal dominion. There's no way to accept that on the terms when you're creating an automatic, separation, a point of conflict and contention there. So I think that in the argument of the transgender sports, is really, let's start first with a tri-terry sports and make it so it's inclusive for everybody, however they choose to show up. Because I can imagine, if you're a transgender girl going into play in the boys team, because what other options do you have? How do you solve for the bathroom problem? How do you solve for dressing down, in the locker room? How do you solve for the fact that you're choosing to show up as a girl and this person, may not treat you as one? And so it's like, it creates a more welcoming and opening space when we just create a tri-terry system for sports and integrate everybody based off of who they choose to show up as, And then it also makes it so that the girls can feel safe and the boys can feel respected and the transgender people can feel like they belong too, And this isn't about like, the only way that you can be transgender is if you're accepted by everybody else. No, this is about self-acceptance. You accept yourself and you love and you respect and you appreciate yourself as you are. And all you need is the opportunity to show up in spaces and be true to who you are. But other people need that safe space too. And so let's create safe space so everybody can do that without us creating points of contention and conflict that's unnecessary and avoidable. Let's integrate these people into society and welcome them into being full, expressing themselves in society, and us to be able to embrace them and bring them in and respect them for who they are, especially when it comes to, you know, the young youth who are coming out as transgender. It's very important for their health and their well-being to be able to explore their personhood in a safe space, in a safe environment, so they can really come to know who they truly are. And for society not to have the capacity to tell them, no, these are your only two options. You know what I'm saying? And it helps us to become more welcoming as a society, and I think that's very important. I also think that it's a good thing when we have some states choose to allow transgenders to play in sports. That's okay too. You know, I think that's okay if they choose to allow for that to happen. But I think that it's important that it's something that you can communicate with everybody who's going to be on the team, and that it really is something that could be a team decision and allowed for people to choose if they want to create a tri-terry sport system and vote and opt for that, instead of, you know, the school or the state saying, nope, that's just the way it's going to be. Allow people to choose, allow them to voice their opinions, you know, and create it so that it's reflective of the type of environment and space and culture that you want to establish in your state, reflective of your needs. But always default to the idea that we have to create safe space for everybody to feel welcome and belong, and to not force other people into uncomfortable situations in order to suit the sensibilities of a few. And with that, I think, you know, we are super blessed as a nation to have these sorts of challenges facing us now. Like, I'm so happy that we have evolved as a society where LGBTQ plus people can come out and be true to who they are and self-expression and find ways to integrate and to belong and be accepted. You know, June was Pride Month, and there were many different Pride events where people came out and got to, you know, show their sense of flair and independence and self-expression, and just show their presence and like, I belong too, and show the enthusiasm for that. And it's a beautiful thing. It really truly is, especially because it's like, because society doesn't really know that they're there yet. We have to have those like, I'm coming out parties sort of thing. Like, I just want, what was, how did the song go? Let the world know, let it show. Is a great opportunity for us to become more tolerant and more accepting, and to give more empowerment and encouragement and esteem to people a part of that community, and to become more open and inviting and empathetic and compassionate and sympathetic for people who are just allies, and to get more people to become allies. Be like, it's okay, this is nothing to be scared of or whatever, you're just people too, you know, and how you choose to show up and your pursuit of happiness is different from mine, and that's okay, you know. So I think that that's a lot of part of this process of integration too, of allowing these people safe space to belong as well. And we can break down a lot of the like bigotry, which is mostly based off of like distorted perceptions, a lot of it based off of misunderstandings. Those things can be corrected for. We can educate and we can learn, and we do that through experiences and encounters and events and, you know, conversations, and, you know, helping people to feel safe and showing up and like coming out. Like, all of these brilliant, you know, popular public figures and influencers and powerful people and CEOs and sports athletes and, you know, politicians and all these people coming out saying, you know, they're openly a member of that community, and they show up and they express that, and they live out the best truth that they know. And this is empowerment, and it's good for other people to see someone like them, you know, or even just somebody that's so unabashedly themselves show up in the world and just live out the best truth they know. It's good for all of us, and it breaks down the barriers of our bigotry, and it helps us to become more understanding of one another, and these are good things. So, while I wish we lived in a world where everybody could just, be told from now on, we accept everybody. And it's a done deal. We just all accept everybody come as you are, But we're not there yet. And it's part of the process of perfecting our union, of creating acceptance and tolerance and appreciation and, that deep respect and unconditional regard for one another, that agape love, and it has to be cultivated and it has to be pursued intentionally. And I think as we do that for every community that we embrace and we allow them the safe space to be themselves and to belong, it opens up more space for others of other categories to fit in and belong. It helps to break down our bigotries about immigration and gender and, sexual orientation. It breaks down, class structure barriers that have been created, so we can get down to the baseline fundamentals of we're all just human, right? Just there's lots of different ways that can be expressed, and it's a beautiful thing. I think that America has come so far. We have a lot farther to go. This same Supreme Court decided to reverse the Roe v. Wade, and I think that was a real step backwards, but probably a necessary one, only because the way we went about it wasn't really in the process of really accepting what it was truly about. To me, it's about personal dominion. Like, everybody has dominion over their own bodies and they get to have say over it. And I also believe that until a life is viable to live outside of the womb on its own, it's not really a human life, and there's no moral dilemma for aborting a pregnancy. And that's why having, the so many weeks opportunity for people to choose to abort is important, and for us to have the know-how to be able to perform abortions is a life-saving medical treatment that's important to keep in our knowledge base and our experiential base and our capacity, because it's a life-saving procedure in many ways. And but it ultimately comes down, this isn't a moral dilemma, this is a personal dominion decision, and that is self-governance and self-determination. And it's not something that, the government can intercede or intervene on behalf of an individual, because their role is not to moralize society. Even the founding fathers, if you look back in the Federalist Papers, they understood we want a moral society, we want moral leaders, but they are not, you cannot create laws that would change the heart of people. That's what, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, is like, you can't create a law to change a person's heart, but you can create a law to constrain somebody who has bad intentions towards another person. Togrel Summit. The founding fathers believed it, Martin Luther King believed it. We can't change people to conform to our sensibilities about what's morally right or wrong. We can create ethical bounds and standards, but those have limits in it, and understanding like there is a point in time where everybody's self-determined, and only when it reaches beyond a point where that self-determination now becomes an hindrance or a harm, externally, do we have to answer the question to, is this in the best interest of everybody involved? That's when it becomes, something that we have to deal with through government to solve the intractability of the problem. And so there is a point in time where we have to have the question of, well, it's not reasonable to have an abortion before after a certain time period. But before that, there is no moral qualm, and that's a personal decision. And up until that point, there's no justification, no jurisdiction for a government to intercede on behalf, because the life within there is not viable to live externally without, supports. So there's not a moral question in there. Now, do other people who have a different standard of morals maybe not want to interpret, in that way? okay? But the argument stands, like, you can believe that. You can stand by that. That can be your soul print value. You can argue for that. You can campaign and you can protest for that. You know, you can try to convince and compel people to see things your way and adhere to your moralistic, value system. But that does not give you the power to control somebody else's life and determine for them what's right for them. It doesn't give you the power to harm or attack a person because they make a choice that is other than what you would have made for yourself. Like, there has to be that boundary by which, the distance by which I can love myself and you simultaneously. And if you cross over that, then you're impeding on my pursuit of happiness. You're infringing upon my personal dominion, and you don't have that right. And that's a safe space of mutual respect. It's okay for you to want to try to, help me to see things your way. Culturally expand horizons and broaden perspectives and bring your justifications and let's debate and dialogue about it, and maybe you can change my heart and mind about it and make me think, consider a different way. And perhaps you might, win me over to the side of doing something different. But ultimately, the decision rests with me as a person, an individual, in my dominion. I'm the leader. I am the ultimate decision maker, not you. And I think that that's ultimately where we had a really big problem with it. Is it was argued on a basis of not really getting at that root fundamental principle. And I think that's why establishing a constitutional amendment creating a personal dominion insulary level of governance is really important, because it also protects against somebody who wants to become transgender. Like, that's not your distinguishment and determination. I do believe, and this is a personal thing, and it's something that I think should be, debated and dialogued, just like there's, certain weeks by which it's okay to have an abortion, but anything after that probably isn't such a good thing. There's also probably a time frame which it's probably not the best idea to have somebody undergo gender affirming care that is irreversibly altering to their bodies, because we don't fully understand and know what that means and what the outcomes are going to be. We're in the early stages of this type of stuff, and I think it's something that we should have open dialogue, and we should do intentional research, and we should come into an understanding about it, but not like socially sanction it to make it impossible for us to find the truth about it, so that we can know we're coming from a place of like, this is, legitimacy. We really truly know that this is something that is good or bad either way, but at the same time, that's a conversation that we need to have, and I think that it ultimately rests with the personal dominion of the individual, and the government really has to make the case, and it should be coming from a case of legitimacy. It's not just like moral qualm. You're not moralizing the world, coming from a place of like scientific understanding and really getting at it from a perspective of like, here are the logics, here are the justifications, here are the reasons why, and we need to uphold the accordance of this because we want to create the things that are best conducive to the well-being and the welfaring of individuals. And again, I think that's another one of those things, is like, if you want to argue the finer points in society of your sensibilities in regards to somebody being transgender, I think it's okay for you to have that, open dialogue, but it's not okay for you to impose your will on somebody else, or to accost them, or to harass them, or to exploit them, or manipulate them, or abuse them. Like, that's never something that somebody should be allowed to do. You're infringing on my personal dominion in that case. So, but this is something, it's fairly new in society in terms of like it coming out into the public consciousness. Not that it hasn't always been here, it's been a part of human civilization, for like ever. So many cultures have transgenders in it, and many cultures fully embrace it and actually celebrate it. But in America, it's a fairly new mainstream kind of idea, and so it's something that we have to talk about and have a conversation about. This is where having the channels of communication and an innovation where we can have a public discourse about these things is super important, because it gives us a chance to break things down where it's not on weird social media platforms where people are incentivized to be mean and cruel and hateful and violent towards one another, but rather like we really truly do have the general conversation, and we have the debates, and we argue the finer points, and we really reveal, how we sense this, how we feel about it, where our tolerance points are, and these sorts of things, and work that out together in a very public way, and then allow for things like, pride events and whatnot for people to go out and express themselves, because that helps us become more accepting and tolerant, and just realize that, there's really nothing bad about it. It's kind of fun, and it's interesting, and it's a beautiful way to self-express and become, be that version of human in your pursuit of happiness. It's beautiful. So, there's so many different, societal problems that we have to deal with, cultural problems that we have to deal with. And I think most of that stuff should be, we deal with it together as a society outside of the realms of politics. There should be no governing those sorts of things. Unless there's a way we find that we can agree, this will solve for the intractability of the problem. And this will actually help to solve for some of the problems that come out, that we realize we need to have a very well distinguished boundary and barrier, a limitation, some sort of law that prevents people from like doing harm or something like that. Prevent like a hate crime and these sorts of things. Like, we need to have those, because some people are not self-controlled enough where they wouldn't, when left to their own devices, go and do something harmful to others just because they don't like how they choose to show up in the world. So we need to have government to help us to like solve for that problem, in such a way where it's like trying to not close the door and shut out people's capacity to become accepting and tolerant, but at the same time understanding there are, we need to have some separation between some people, because it's not always going to drive very well. So I think having a leader that approaches it in that way is far more important and valuable, especially in these times, because we're really starting to come into our own in terms of like, America really is a place where, you can do, be, and become anything that you want to be. And we're so tolerant and accepting when you think of the big, broad picture. How it plays out in small areas or even on certain platforms, it may not seem like we are. But we are, in a sense of like, there are other countries where just for being a woman and not conforming in a certain way, you could lose your life. Your life could be taken from you because of that. There's some countries where being a part of the LGBTQ plus community, you could be killed, or savagely beaten, subjected to terror and violence just because of who you are. America, for the most part, when something like that happens, we stand out against it. We say that's hate, and we cannot tolerate that here. We call it out, we have public conversations about it, and we try to discuss ways to solve for the intractability of that. In the government, some people in government who care enough become responsive. They're like, this is something that happened, and let's talk about it, guys. When this happens, this isn't a good thing, and we have to do something about it. I very much like to do that. When events happen, I like to come out and talk. I do it with my children. I call it Mama Bear Talks, where it's just like, this thing happened in society. We're just going to sit and talk about it. I want you to know where I'm coming from, so that when they're left to their own devices and they're alone, they have my voice of conscience in the back of their head that says, this is the right thing, this is the wrong thing. Or even just a support of saying, like, like with a mass shooting or something like that. Mom's voice will kick in that heated moment to say everything's going to be fine, stay calm, stay focused, stay safe, stay hidden, get out if it's safe, these sorts of things. And I think that that's what we need out of a leader, is somebody who's willing to come up and have those types of conversations when difficult moments arise. So much happens all the time, all over the place. You're not going to be able to be everywhere all at once, but you can have enough representatives that are able to stand in on your behalf, till there's a point in time where you can stand up and be able to say, this is what we're going to do, or this is how I feel, or this is what I think in regards to that. So, you know, we have vast potential here in America, and we have come so far. We have so much farther to go, and I really just want everybody to get on board with what I'm hoping to bring about and accomplish, because again, like, I know it seems, idealistic, and it seems like maybe to some people it seems impossible what I'm suggesting here. There's going to be a lot of people who are going to just like reject it, because again, it's, breaking away from the status quo. And I get it. I totally understand, change is hard, and people will fight against change. It was just like our Declaration of Independence is like, there's many people who are willing to suffer while things are sufferable, before they finally stand up and say, okay, enough is enough, and they do something about it. So there's some people that don't want things to change, other people that want things to change but don't know how, many people that are like, they want things to change but they're not willing to create new life ways and create new behaviors. And so that's why we need to have a president that has a vision and that's encouraging and that can get us all on the same page and lead us where we need to go. And to do so in such a way where it's like not wasting our time fighting the old system, really working towards what is going to be good for us all. Because I spend most of my time worrying about the people who have the least, and the people who suffer the most, and the people who are being left behind. I think of the discarded people most of the time. I actually have to intentionally get myself to think about other people who have everything, because those aren't the people that need the support and the care of making sure that they're going to be okay day to day, other than the moral qualms and dilemmas and the personal angst that they might be going through, because it's got to be hard for them to live in a society where there's so much suffering, human suffering, while they're living the lap of luxury. There has to be some sort of moral qualm that they have with that, and that's got to be challenging. There's some people that have tons of money but are soulless and unhappy, and I think of them with pity and disappointment and sympathy. I really wish to end that suffering for them, but I know the only way to do that is for somebody to care in all the ways that they can't, that they're not capable of, and to do something about it so they don't have to worry about it anymore. But most of my time is spent thinking of everyday people. I mean, I drive down the street and I see homeless people, and I'm constantly saying, Lord, please continue to bless my path